Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, your resident Christian apologist. And today I have an interview with Dr. Carl Werner, who is going to be talking to us about and responding to the claim of transitional fossils. And he's got a presentation he's going to be presenting, and there's going to be a really good Q&A following his presentation. So I can't wait. And so without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm with my guest today, Dr. Carl Werner, and we're going to be talking about alleged transitional fossils that are claimed by evolutionists, and we're going to be responding to that. Dr. Werner has a presentation he wants to present, and then following that presentation, I've got some questions I want to ask him, and so we're going to jump right to it. Dr. Werner, could you give kind of a brief introduction to yourself? And just, I know you've been on here several times, and but just kind of give some things on the background and anything you're working on, if you want to throw that in there, that's okay too.
Well, my name is Dr. Carl Werner. I'm a physician, retired, and I used to believe in evolution during my preteen and teen years. And when I entered medical school, I was consolidated into believing in evolution because of what my professors taught me about the Haeckel's embryos, which turned out to be not true. And a friend took me out to lunch when I was in my sophomore year of medical school. I was 19 years old in an accelerated 6-year medical school. And he asked me three questions that I couldn't answer. And the questions were, how could you create the universe naturally since matter doesn't form naturally? How could you form life naturally since DNA doesn't form out of chemicals? And why does the fossil record have these gaps between animals if evolution occurred? Because you would expect, with so many fossils collected, 1 billion fossils, you would expect you could see the transition from one group to another. And his questions were so profound, Brian, I was just silenced. Now I was there on a full ride scholarship, all tuition paid at the University of Missouri for the medical school. And I was former winner of international science competition. And here I was, I couldn't answer these simple questions that were so profound. I went home and thought about them, and I realized my belief in naturalism or evolution just can't be true if these three questions posed to me, if I don't have the answers for those. I didn't know where to go with that, but yeah, it was like, I don't know what to do with the dinosaurs. I don't know what to do with the millions of years, but he's right. You couldn't form the universe naturally without an external force, God creating the matter, and you couldn't form life since DNA doesn't form. So then I started on I guess now it's probably 40-year journey investigating evolution. My wife and I traveled around the world, maybe like 300,000 miles, went to 16 countries, 5 or 6 continents, and we filmed interviews with over 100 scientists, a who's who list of scientists like Don Johanson and Richard Leakey and the like. And at the end of it all, I realized that evolution is not true, that I was misled into believing it with false evidence, and that the only logical explanation for how all this got here, how I got here, is that I was created. So that's my life in 59 seconds, and that's all I can give you, Brian.
Right. And that's a very long and very adventurous life you led there. And of course, you are the author of the Grand Experiment as well. I don't have the books out because I'm still unpacking stuff because I moved into a new apartment, actually, for everybody else. I'm living in a new apartment, and this is the first interview and video I've done since being here. So that's the apartment behind me. So I know it's a new setting, a new scene. But I do have a couple of your books on grand experiments, on the grand experiment, and where you respond to evolution and you talk about living fossils. And in fact, we actually did a video on living fossils a while back. Uh, that got a lot of interesting reactions there. But today we are talking about alleged transitional fossils that are believed by the evolutionary community. And I do believe you have a presentation ready for us. So whenever you are ready, begin share.
Yeah. So before we begin, I just would like to appeal to those who are watching this video who believe in evolution and who believe in naturalism to just park your ideas just for this next hour. Just park them on the side and let me have an opportunity to present some new information to you. Maybe it's not new, but maybe it's a different presentation format. And let me make my points before you judge my my conclusions. And otherwise, it's kind of a waste of your time to even watch it if you're not going to even listen to the data that I have. So that would be my appeal. I'm going to share these slides, but as I'm going through, just think on your own. Don't think of what your professor would have told you to believe. Don't think about what the books tell you, but just think on your own. And by the way, I'm not making any money off of this deal. I've never made a penny out of all this. So it's not like I'm trying to get your money or I have some, dark motivation to try to convince you. I'm just trying to share the information. The title of the talk tonight is The Rarity of Transitional Fossils Proves Creation. And, when I talk about transitional fossils, I'm not talking about lining up 5 different kind of bass fish, a rock bass, a spotted bass, a largemouth bass, a smallmouth bass, and saying, look, there's evolution between these different bass. That's not what I'm talking about, just variation or difference within a kind. I want to know where bass came from. I want to know where fish came from, the big picture, because you could be fooled by starting off with similar animals like a bunch of bass or a bunch of bats and say, oh, this bat evolved into this bat and this bat evolved into this bat. But the bigger question, and if evolution is true, is show me the evolution of the bat, show me the evolution of fish. And that's where evolution breaks down. When you actually look at it from a more, I call it objective viewpoint, because if evolution is true, it'll be just as obvious for the little changes as the big changes, because it would all have had to transition from this bacteria up to man. So it should be easy to prove evolution using the big changes. And this theory of naturalism or evolution was dealt a blow, you could say a fatal blow, in 1977 by Dr. Stephen Jay Gould. Now, for those who are not familiar with the late Dr. Gould, he was a professor at Harvard University, and he was not a friend of Christians or creationism. In fact, he was the opposite. He was an atheist, he was a socialist, he was a Marxist, and he wrote this article in Natural History, which is the magazine for the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and it's titled Evolution's Erratic Pace. And he wrote the following, a kind of a synopsis of where the fossil record is. He says, Darwin portrayed evolution as an orderly process working at a speed so slow that a person couldn't hope to observe it in a lifetime. ancestors and descendants, argued Darwin, must be connected by infinitesimally transitional links in the fossil record, forming the finest graduated steps. So, in other words, a fish going to an amphibian, there would have to be numerous steps, little steps to get from the fish to the amphibian, or a tree shrew or a mouse to a bat. There'd have to be infinitesimally small but numerous transitional steps to get to those. But Dr. Gould says the fossil record, quite oddly, offers no support for gradual change. He writes that new species almost always appear suddenly in the fossil record with no intermediate links to the ancestors in the older rocks. In other words, the animals just suddenly appear. They don't show up as transitioning from one animal to another. He said this extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. Now, my first question is why would you want to make that a trade secret? Aren't we all about science and openness and let's get to the truth? But the paleontologists have swept this problem under the rug and out of sight, out of mind, so that you don't question evolution. But that's stupid. Aren't we all seeking the right answer on this question? Did we evolve? Did we not evolve? And yet they have kept this rarity of transitional forms a secret from the public, which is quite over the top. I want to show you what he's talking about in some practical photographs of fossils, and you'll see why this is such a tremendous problem for Darwin's theory. Now, we're going to start with the origin of phyla. Now, all animals could be divided up into different phyla, and there's 7 phyla that contains 99% of all the animals. Like there's the coral phyla over here on the right, there's a sponge phyla, there's a shellfish phyla, there's a worm phyla, the fish are vertebrate phyla, and the echinoderms. This is 99% of all animals. And according to evolution, these animals evolved from a bacteria. Now, this bacteria image that I made here is blown up. A bacteria you can't see. You see, you have to magnify it 10,000 times, under a microscope just to see it. And so I'm going to shrink this bacteria to where you really would have a sense of how small it is. You wouldn't even be able to see this dot here, but that's the bacteria. So according to Darwin, this bacteria evolved slowly over millions of years into corals, into arthropods, into worms, into sponges, and into the first fish. The problem, Brian, is that these photographs that I'm showing you, most of them I took myself, these photographs are from the animals in the lowest layer, or the lowest 2 layers, the Cambrian layer and the layer below that, the Ediacaran layer. These animals suddenly show up in these layers without transition from the bacteria into this 1.5 foot tall sponge, this coral, 1.5 foot tall coral. Now, I photographed this down there at Flinders Range in Australia, and it's a beautiful fossil sea pen, and it's on the lowest layer. See, there's no layer below that would have full size, full animals. And so you have bacteria supposedly getting into this 1.5 foot tall coral, but there's no fossils of an animal, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, half bacteria, half coral, 3/4 bacteria, 1/4 coral. Same with the bacteria evolving into a sponge. There's no fossils between the bacteria and this first sponge. This first sponge, which I photographed at the Smithsonian, is from the Cambrian layer, and it's from Burgess Shale. And it's a full sponge. It looks like the sponges you'd see in the ocean today. And yet it's the first sponge. It just shows up. There's no intermediates between the bacteria and the sponge. Same with the worm. It just shows up, and that's from the Cambrian layer. And this lower Cambrian fish, I don't know if you can see the outline of it here. This fish shows up in the Cambrian layer without any ancestors between the bacteria and this fish. Now, that's kind of incredible, but an evolutionist most of the time would then revert to saying, well, the reason we don't see these transitional fossils of a bacteria going to a fish or a bacteria going to a coral is because the fossil record just doesn't preserve these small bacteria or these little soft-bodied animals. And so that's why you don't see the transition. But that argument is bogus with a capital B. And I'm going to show you why. There have been 1 billion fossils collected so far. A billion, a B, billion. That's 1,000 museums. Each have approximately 1 million fossils. If you want to see the number, you can go to my book here and see the data for that. Now, that would be considered a pretty good fossil record, especially when you think that 90% of the animals that are alive today you can find as fossils. So the fossil record preserves 90% of what has happened in the past. And the fossil record actually preserves the small things and the soft things. So you should be able to see the transitions between the bacteria and the first fish, and the bacteria and the first coral. For example, this is fossil bacteria. They have thousands and thousands of fossil bacteria. Well, if you can preserve the fossils of bacteria, you should be able to preserve the animals between the bacteria and the first fish. This is a picture of fish eggs. Now, you know how soft fish eggs are. It'd be difficult to find them, but here we are. We have a fossil of fish eggs that were preserved, indicating that we do preserve the small and the soft-bodied creatures and artifacts. These are animal embryos. Now, embryo is not an animal in and of itself. It's the baby embryo. You know, it's the offspring. And here they are, 4-cell, 8-cell, 16-cell. These are microscopic. They're embryos, and yet they're preserved. And here's a fossil jellyfish. Now, think about a jellyfish. It's just jelly, you know, so to speak. There's no bones in there. And you couldn't even imagine that could form as a fossil. But here we have fossil jellyfish. And there's not just one. There's many, many of these fossil jellyfish. Here's a fossil worm. Think of this. There's no bones in this animal. It's just a worm. And yet it's perfectly preserved, suggesting that we should be able to see the intermediates between the bacteria and the fish. And here's fossil flower petals. And here's a cattail head. You know how soft those are alongside the ponds there, you'd see. It's perfectly preserved. And even artifacts like alligator poop. Alligator poop you would not think would be preserved as a fossil, but here it is as a fossil on display at a museum. And so if the fossil record contains 1 billion fossils and 900 million of those, or more than 900 million, are fossil invertebrates, like the 6 of these phyla, and if they preserve the small things, and if we have thousands and thousands of each of these, or millions and millions, you would expect to find the intermediates, the transitionals that Darwin said should be out there and will eventually be found. But we haven't found them. It's been 160 years. It's time to call the search off. We have not found the origin of the 7 fossil groups, animal groups. And the evolution scientists have a name for this problem. It's called the Cambrian explosion. It's in the Cambrian layer, or the layer below it, the Ediacaran, and these 7 animal groups just suddenly appear without an ancestor, and it's a problem. It's a trade secret for paleontology. And you could just say, well, let's just go home. You know, this lecture's over. There's no point in going on if you can't even show me how these 7 animal groups formed. Why would we go on? But I'm going to go on because you have a lot of stuff on your shelf that you parked for me here. I want to address all those ideas that you have. But now it's not just the Cambrian explosion, which is the problem with the origin of the animals in the phyla, the 7 phyla, but even within any one of these phyla, the animals just show up. Now I'm going to do for you just the phyla of vertebrates. Vertebrates are animals with backbones, like fish, like amphibians, like reptiles, like birds, like mammals. Anything that has a backbone would be the vertebrate. And we're going to look at these vertebrates. And I'm going to show you that they too show an absence of transitional fossils by and large, except there are a few exceptions, and I'm going to address those exceptions at the end of the lecture. Let's just do this. So these are photographs my wife Debbie took, and these were from all around the world, Wyoming and Messel bats in Germany, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that these fossil bats that she photographed are beautiful. They're perfectly preserved. You can see the wing membranes. You can see the soft ear cartilage. You can see what they had for lunch before they died. You can see every bone in their body. And there's 1,000 of these bats. Now, scientists would say that a bat, which is a mammal, but a bat is the only flying mammal, all the other mammals are on the ground, that it would have to evolve from a mammal that's on the ground. And it used to be, they think it was a mouse-like animal. Now they think it was a tree shrew-like animal, but you get the picture. It's a small little creature that evolved into a bat. Now, I'm going to ask the members of the audience, if we found 1,000 fossil bats, and if we have many of these fossil tree shrews, how many animals would you think it took to go from a tree shrew to a bat? Because a tree shrew wouldn't mate with its mate and then look at the babies in one generation, say, look, we'd had a baby bat. No, it's not one generation. It's millions of generations for this tree shrew to get longer and longer arms. See how long the arms are for the bat? To get shorter and shorter back legs, because you don't need them so much, and to develop a wing membrane, etc. So I've simplified this for everybody to say that these animals between the tree shrew and the bat would be animals A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, but actually you could probably have A through triple Z, but you get the idea. And animal D would be an animal halfway evolved between the ground mammal, the tree shrew, and the bat. So animal D might be, it kind of looks like a tree shrew, but its arms are very long. And then animal G would be, it looks kind of like a bat. It's kind of has like a tree shrew. It has very long arms and has a wing membrane, but the legs are in the wrong length and the bones are still too heavy, so it can't fly. And animal B would be just the tree shrew just beginning to evolve, the arms being out just a little bit longer, like right here. So if we have 1,000 bats and we have 1 billion fossils, how many of these in-between animals do you think we have found? And here's the numbers. We have not found any animal A, 0 fossils. For animal B, we have no fossils. For animal C, zip. For animal D, there is not a single fossil has been found of animal D. E, 0. F, nada. G, nothing. H, zip. We don't have a single animal between a bat and a tree shrew and a bat. Not a single one. Now, who's saying this? Because you don't want Carl Werner's opinion. You want the evolution scientists who are going to give you the goods. Well, Debbie and I just happened to interview the world's evolution experts on bat evolution. And they told us this. They said that there's no intermediates. They haven't found an intermediate between the tree shrew and the bat. Now, I'm going to play you a clip from our video series where these guys are talking and explaining this. And if you'll bear with me, this is just about 2 minutes of this video clip. I'm going to put the microphone over there, but just listen to what they're saying, because they're going to confirm what I just told you. And you want to get the data that's from them, not from me, So here we go.
Bats are warm-blooded flying mammals. Some bats use sonar-like echolocation to catch their prey. An amazing 1,000 fossil bats have been collected so far. Many of these are complete bats. Some show breathtaking minute detail, such as wing membranes, fur, and even stomach contents. Despite this rich fossil record, Darwin's predicted intermediates have not been found. There are no fossils showing a ground mammal similar to a mouse, slowly changing into a flying mammal, a bat.
You would guess that there'd be some sort of a bat precursor, but once again, nothing. Bingo, they just show up. And so, as you might guess, that there are certain people that think they were specially created. They actually are kind of a problem with the creationists who like to, if things were created, here's a very highly complex mammal with all these adaptations, and bingo, they just show up at some particular moment in time fully formed as a bat. Obviously, we evolutionary biologists and paleontologists don't believe that, but at this point we don't have a good fossil ancestor for them.
When did bats evolve from the land mammals? When is it theorized?
It's also, that must have happened also in the lowest tertiary, but we have no evidence for this evolution. Also, the bats appear perfectly developed.
We don't have any non-flying bats, and so we can't pull something out of that, any kind of information out of that tells us how they might have evolved.
What period of time did the bats evolve, do we think?
We have no fossil records of bats during the Cretaceous period. And this means that we are only depending on speculation when it started and what happened in that time. Of course, when we have the oldest bats, like Icaronicterus, they were completely developed in their morphology and their flight apparatus, and also the messel bats were completely developed. So we can only speculate.
Opponents of evolution have seized on this lack of evolutionary intermediates in the fossil record. They ask, how many more bats would have to be collected before one declares the absence of ancestors a reality? For them, the fossil evidence of bats clearly speaks against evolution.
So that is, like I say, a clip from our video series, episode 1 on evolution, the grand experiment. And that, what they just said is basically what the fossil record shows. It's extraordinary that that's the situation. Why do we believe in evolution would be my question. And I'm going to go through this, and each of these examples, it's the evolutionist data that is being provided, not my data. Let's do fossil pterosaurs or flying reptiles. There's no reptile that flies today, but in the past there was a reptile called a pterosaur, pterodactyls. They were reptiles, but they flew. And they have collected, they being evolution scientists, have collected 1,000 amazing pterosaurs. And these, again, look perfectly preserved. Most of them, you can see all the bones in them. Not all of them, but there's a good number of them that have this extraordinary preservation. And the world's expert on flight says that there are 1,000 of them, but they say they don't know where the ancestors are. They never found an ancestor to the pterosaur. The pterosaurs, just like the bats, just showed up. For example, here's a pterosaur, a flying reptile, and here's a ground reptile. I just chose this lizard. I don't know which lizard they're going to say it is this week that evolved into this. But if we have 1,000 flying reptiles, and if we have thousands of ground reptiles, we should expect to see a ground reptile slowly evolving into the flying reptile. And that means, just like the bat, the front arms are going to have to get longer and longer to make the wings. He's going to eventually have to evolve wing membranes, which you would be able to see in the fossil record. And it'd have to become more and more lightweight so it could be aerodynamic, et cetera, et cetera. And the musculature is going to go primarily from the back legs for walking to primarily the front legs for flying. And animals A through H should be the intermediate animals you'd expect. And animal E would be an animal half lizard, half flying reptile. Maybe its arms are 2/3 of the way out, but not fully out. You can't see his wing membrane. Maybe animal G, his arms are very long and the wing membrane just starting to form, etc. But according to the evolution scientists, there are no intermediates between a ground reptile and a flying reptile. None. Zero. They haven't found any animal A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and that's being generous. There should be animals A through triple Z. There should be hundreds of intermediate steps, but they have nothing. Same with, we're going up the vertebrates now, same with fossil fish. They have collected 500,000 fish. Debbie took these photographs at the various museums. These fish fossils are amazing. They're perfectly preserved. You can see the fins, you can see the bones, you can see sometimes the stomach contents, et cetera, et cetera. Even the cartilaginous ones like the rays you can see. And yet these fish just suddenly appear with this extraordinary fossil record. Remember the fossil fish I showed you in the Cambrian explosion that was down here on the bottom of the slide? And I said, there's no ancestors to get to this first fish in the Cambrian layer. And that fish is, by the way, is from Nature magazine. And you can see the reference on the slides here. But that fish is Cambrian. And it's supposed to have evolved into the different kinds of fish like lampreys, sharks, ratfish, et cetera, coelacanth, lungfish. But according to the world's expert on fish evolution, that's John Long in Melbourne, he says that there are no connections between the first fish and the fish groups. You see, his solid line is where they found fossils. Yes, we have lots of fossil lampreys. Yes, we have lots of fossil sharks. Yes, we have lots of fossil ratfish. But the dots mean that we have no intermediate fossils. So we go from this first fish to each of the groups, and you have no idea within evolution of the fish how the fish groups started. You can't find how the first fish got here. You can't even find how the sharks got here. That is exactly what Stephen Gould was talking about. And this is why everybody needs to take a deep breath and sit back and say, wait a minute, this is too much. This is too repetitive. This is like the same theme over and over and over. Here's dinosaurs. They've collected 100,000 dinosaurs. Many of these are just single bones, but they have 3,000 articulated dinosaurs, meaning they have a whole bunch of bones in a row connected. 100,000 dinosaurs, that would be considered fairly robust fossil record. But according to David Weishampel, who is the author of the Bible of Dinosaur Evolution, it's called the Dinosauria. It's about 1.5 inches thick. We interviewed him. Dr. Weishampel, what are the ancestors to Tyrannosaurus? What are the ancestors to sauropod? What are the ancestors to the armored plate dinosaurs? And he summarized, he said, there is not a single ancestor for any dinosaur species. Now, if there's anybody that would know this is the man. And he says it, and this is in episode 1. He says it on episode 1. You can watch him say it. And this just doesn't connect. This is crazy. But there's people in the audience right now who say, this guy is full of bull. This guy meaning Carl Werner. He's given us all these bad examples of evolution not having fossils, but I know we have them. So you might think and believe. And so he's hiding them from me. No, I just haven't got to your proofs that are floating around in your mind of why you believe in evolution, why you think the fossil record shows evolution. And you could summarize and ask evolution scientists, what are the 3 best proofs of evolution using fossils now, where you could show one animal slowly changing into another animal? And I think most evolution scientists and most people in the audience would say, hey, you got the ape men, where an ape is evolving to man. We got all those ape men. You got the dinosaurs evolving into birds. You got all the feathered dinosaurs from China. And then you got the walking whales. So forget what Carl Werner just told us, because he's hiding these 3 best examples. And of course he would, because he doesn't believe in evolution. No, I just haven't got to it yet. So just sit on your hands and, like I say, park all your information on the side. Let me make my presentation, please, because You're going to die. We interviewed the top scientists in these three fields. It took us 27 years. We interviewed the top scientists in whale evolution. We interviewed the top scientists in bird evolution, and we interviewed the top scientists in human evolution. And they told a completely different story. And your best proofs, which is holding your whole belief in evolution, are actually bogus. And just let me explain that, because this is not known. This is not on the internet. Nobody talks about this because they don't want to. So let's do the first best proof of evolution. That is the evolution of a whale from a land animal. Evolutionists believe that some land animal, and if you go to different museums, talk to different evolution scientists, each museum, each scientist will tell you a different land animal. Some would say it's a cat-like animal. Some would say it's a wolf-like animal. Some would say it's a hippo. Some would say it's a deer. Some would say Darwin said it was a bear. Each lion, there's just countless animals that have been suggested as to what animal evolved into whales. At the museum that we went to, which was the top museum on whale evolution, they said it was this animal called Cynonyx, but after we did the interview, they canceled that one too. But here is this best proof of evolution. Whales, land animals with 4 legs, slowly evolving to a 4-legged whale, and the legs get smaller and smaller, and then it just becomes a whale. This is a problem. And here's the problem is this man right here, Phil Gingrich. I want to give you a little background history that you may not have heard, because this story exploded in the 1980s with Phil Gingrich finding the first walking whale called Pakicetus. You see, he found the fossil whale, and when he announced it, it ends up on the cover of Science magazine as the best proof of evolution. And Pakicetus has 4 legs that are flippers. It has a blowhole. The nose isn't, the nostrils aren't at the tip of the nose, but it's further up like a blowhole, not all the way back like a whale, but halfway back. And the eyes are on the side of the head, and it has a whale's ear. This is a problem right here, this man, okay? So when we went to the museum, we'd say we wanted to see what the fossils of Pakicetus were that they made this diagram from. And this is the fossils right here. And it's only the dark gray. See, this is Pakicetus' skull. And they only found this little fragment, this lower jaw fragment with 3 teeth and some loose teeth. That's all they had. They didn't have the snout, the blowhole. They just had these 3 small fragments. They didn't have the arms or the legs. They just had these 3 small fragments, and then they created this animal from these fragments. That's very problematic. I don't believe it. How would you know it had legs? How would you know it had flippers? How do you know it had a blowhole? How do you even know that the eyes are on the side of the head instead of on the top? How do you know that? Well, that was, let me see what that date is. I think it's 1983, April 1983. Yeah, in Science. A problem occurred for Dr. Gingrich, and this is a problem. 18 years later, they actually found the full animal, Pakicetus. This skeleton is on display at the Los Angeles Natural History Museum. It is a full skeleton of Pakicetus, and it looks nothing like this. Pakicetus is a land animal. It is not a whale. It's not a whale-like. It doesn't have flippers. It has normal feet. It doesn't have a blowhole. The nostrils are at the tip, as opposed to what he thought it would be. The eyes aren't on the side like a whale. They're on the top like a dog. And it didn't even have a whale's ear, which was the premise of the whole thing. So the first walking whale collapsed, and it's no longer a 4-legged walking whale with flippers. Now it's just a land animal. And because they don't want to let it go, they now say, well, this is the animal. It evolved into whales. But if you ask the next scientist, they'd say, no, this has nothing to do with whales. The second scientist who found a walking whale was this scientist. His name is Hans Thewissen. And he was the graduate student for Dr. Phil Gingrich. And Dr. Thewissen found this animal called Ambulocetus. And he said it had 4 flippers, and it had a blowhole, and the eyes were on the top of the head, and it had a whale's ear. Well, we interviewed him also, and this was an incredible interview. At his museum, the university, I think it's Ohio, he had this display of Ambulocetus skeleton, which is total bogus. This is BS. This is false, and I'll show you why. Okay, the skeleton's pretty extraordinary. You can't quite see it here, but here's a blowhole. Again, the blowhole's not at the tip, but it's up here, and he said it has a whale's ear. And there it is, Ambulocetus. And yet, when we interviewed him and photographed the fossils, we noticed he doesn't have the tip of the snout. Now watch this. The Smithsonian has him with a blowhole, and their museum has him with a blowhole, but the fossil doesn't have a blowhole. Here's the fossil in front of him, and we photographed it, and then we confirmed where these go onto the skull with him, and we laid these fossils onto his skeleton. We made his skeleton black and white so you could tell the difference. And you'll see the skeleton, the fossils just disappear right here. He made this up. And when we interviewed him about this, he admitted that the blowhole shouldn't be there. It should be on the tip. And then when we interviewed him about the whale ear part of this story, he admitted that that doesn't work either. The whole thing is bogus. Now, that's 2 men in the same office, or one was a graduate student to the other, that found 2 walking whales, and they're both BS. Let me go to the next one. We go back to Dr. Gingrich now, who found the Pachycetus, and here he found Rhodocetus. Again, here's the problem. This man is the problem. It's not evolution. This man is a problem. He says, I found this walking whale. It has 4 legs, flippers. And look at this. It has a fluke. That's called a whale's tail, where it gets wide at the end. It has a fluke, flippers. And I found it. And yet when we photographed his fossils and laid them onto his drawing, his fossils, his drawing, we realized he doesn't have any fossils of the fluke on the tail. He doesn't have any fossils of the flippers. He made these ideas up. You could say that he doesn't really have a good area up here. I'm not sure about that. I haven't been convinced that that's broken or missing. When we interviewed him, he admitted on camera that he made up the flippers, and he admitted on camera that he made up the whale's tail. And this is all BS. And he retracted it on camera. And you can again see that in episode 1 of the video series when he makes that disclosure. And now, just put this in perspective, everybody. This is your best proof of evolution. Oh my gosh. This is the best. This is why we're going to believe in evolution, because the rest of the fossil record doesn't work, but this was supposed to be the good part. And you can just go on and on and on. There's problems with these fossils, Dorudon, Basilosaurus. They couldn't be ancestors to the modern whales as they portray, et cetera, et cetera. But you get the idea. This is the best proof. Now I want to address the second best proof of evolution, and that is a dinosaur. Like, here's a diagram from the Smithsonian. Here's a dinosaur evolving into a bird. That's a goose there, Canadian goose. A dinosaur slowly evolving from the year 200 million years old to the modern goose, or you could say to the first bird called Archaeopteryx. It is dinosaur evolving into bird. a ground reptile evolving into a feathered flying creature. And this is considered by most to be the best proof of evolution. Now, as I start tearing this down, there should be no teardowns because this should be just, rock solid. Because we're saying all of evolution's hanging on this, right? If you put it in that perspective, this should be a clean record. I should be able to show you these dinosaurs, a 1-ton dinosaur into a 1,000-pound dinosaur into a 500-pound dinosaur, 250-pound, 100-pound, 3-pound dinosaur. Now it has feathers. I should be able to show you those steps. I'm going to show you why this is all bull. The first bird in the rock layers, and when I say the first bird, it's the bird in the first bird that you find coming up from the bottom. Okay, there's no birds. Okay, here's the first bird. And they found it in Solnhofen, Germany, and it's called Archaeopteryx, and it's supposed to be about 150 million years old, maybe 154 million years old. And this is what Archaeopteryx looks like. It flies, and it has feathers. And most children would say, what is this, children? They say, it's a pheasant, or it's a bird, but they wouldn't say it's a dinosaur. So the first bird looks like a bird. That's a problem. Let me show you why. They don't know what dinosaur from before this bird evolved into this bird. So if this bird, Archaeopteryx, is 150 million years old, let's just say that number, then there should be, going backwards, an animal at 155, 160, 165, 170, all the way back to 200 million years old. I don't believe any of these dates, by the way, but this is what they believe, and I'm going to go with it. A 200 million year old dinosaur would slowly get smaller, slowly get feathers, and then finally you get to this first bird. The problem is, according to the experts, they don't know what dinosaur evolved into birds, and they don't know what these animals are. They don't have any of these animals. And just hold on to your seats, those who are questioning me, because I'm going to show you why you have this false belief into thinking that this is evolution, and you falsely believe that this is intermediates. Let's go back to the Smithsonian. Here's the Smithsonian. It's on display right now. And you go to 200 million years old, and you go to Archaeopteryx, and they show you all the intermediates, like the Maniraptors, Coelosaurs, and et cetera, et cetera. So it looks like they have them. This display is bogus. It's bull. And you can get to this display by going to the Smithsonian virtual tour, and you can download this picture. But when I corrected these animals for their age, they put the animals in the wrong age to make it look like they had dinosaurs evolving into birds. And they made them disproportionately small for the dinosaurs and disproportionately big for the birds, so it didn't look like it was that much of a change. But when you correct it, and I corrected it for you, it took about a week of my time, this is where these animals lived. They have no animals on this chart that lived before Archaeopteryx. And I would just, if you believe in birds evolving from dinosaurs, please tell us what dinosaur, specific name, what dinosaur was it at 200 million years old that evolved into the birds? And 195 million, 190 million, 185 million, 100, you have to lay it out. Then I want you to put it together in a graph showing me by size with the 2-ton dinosaur or whatever the first dinosaur is. Maybe start out with a 500-pound dinosaur. I don't care. But don't be changing the size of the animals, and don't be putting them in the wrong layers. Like here, they say the Maniraptors were here, but the Maniraptors are after Archaeopteryx. How could a Maniraptor have evolved into Archaeopteryx if it lived after Archaeopteryx? This would be like that old Ray Stevens song. I don't know if you've ever heard this song, I Am My Old Grandpa. If you haven't, you're in for a treat. Watch it on YouTube or listen to it. It's so funny. But anyway, his song it tells the reason how he became his own grandpa. And it would be like this. You have your friends over, and you have your grandbaby in a bassinet on the floor, and you tell all your friends, and you're 70 years old, Yeah, this is my great grandpa. And they'd look at you crazy, like, what are you talking about? That's your granddaughter, you know. No, 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 that's my great grandpa. They said, she's younger than you. Right. See, the same with all these dinosaurs that they want to make ancestors to Archaeopteryx. They're younger. They couldn't be. So if this is the best proof, and if what I'm saying is true, this is the second best proof that's just been shot down. And this is only one of, I think I have 11 problems here. This is just the first of 11 problems here. The second problem is that some evolution scientists don't believe that birds evolved from a theropod meat-eating dinosaurs. Like the former curator, he's deceased now, of birds at Smithsonian. He knew more about birds than any person on the planet. And he wrote an open letter to National Geographic, which you can see in my book 1. He said this idea that birds evolved from theropod dinosaurs is a hype, it's a hoax, it's fantasia, it's unsubstantiated, and it's propaganda. That's Dr. Storrs Olson says birds did not evolve from theropod dinosaurs. He said this is a crazy idea. The third problem with your reasons for why you believe that birds evolved from a dinosaur is that the museums and the curators are falsely portraying the data. You remember that movie Jurassic Park, my favorite movie, Jurassic Park 1, where the two kids, little boy and a sister, they're about 12 years old, getting chased through the stainless steel kitchen at Jurassic Park. And these were velociraptors. Remember when he came up to the window of the kitchen and he breathes and the fog on the window? That's a great movie. But anyway, that movie was 1993. That's what Velociraptor looked like. But now, if you go to a museum, and like here's the Melbourne Museum, in 2004, I took this photograph. This is Velociraptor. Now it has feathers. Oh, they must have discovered Velociraptor's skeleton in the ground with feathers. No, they're putting this as a hypothetical because they believe in this idea. This is what the sign says below this picture. It says, no fossil has yet been found that shows traces of feathers on Velociraptor. This is all made up. And you don't need to make up data if it's true. The next problem, and they do this to Archaeopteryx too. They add scales to Archaeopteryx. Like here's Archaeopteryx. They put a reptilian head because they didn't find anything. They didn't find scales, but they didn't find feathers, so they put reptilian head on there. And the lead scientist in Germany said, no, it had feathers. We just didn't find them because these feathers on the head are very small. You wouldn't normally preserve those. So they're changing the data. They're also changing the nomenclature. Scientists are changing the names of birds to create the illusion that birds evolved from dinosaurs. For example, back in 1985, they would call this hummingbird a bird. They would call Archaeopteryx the first bird, and they would call a duck a bird. Now, fast forward to today. No, a hummingbird is not a bird, it's a dinosaur. The evolution scientists would say, no, Archaeopteryx is not a bird, it's a dinosaur. And the duck, it's not a dinosaur bird, it's a dinosaur. That is so bogus. Why would you need to even go there? You know, you don't need to change the names of animals to make us believe. You should be able to prove this to us with the fossils, but you haven't. The next problem is that there was fraud in this area, and this was National Geographic. I think this was 1999. You could see this in our movie 1. National Geographic published this flying dinosaur. It's a missing link, they said. It's a transitional between a dinosaur and a bird. It's the best proof of bird evolution yet. And it's called Archaeoraptor leonensis. And we interviewed the scientists that were involved in this. And this was a false fossil. This was made up. This was a dinosaur tail attached to a bird's body. And if you go in my book, you can see all the different pieces of rock that were brought in here. They split the foot and made a mirror image of it so they could get 2 feet. And it was CAT scan. You could see air bubbles in the plaster between the pieces. I mean, it's just bogus. And when this came out, I just want to tell you that The scientist who did the CAT scan on this fossil, his name is Dr. Tim Rowe at the University of Texas. We interviewed him for episode 1. And Dr. Rowe said that he brought this information to National Geographic scientists before they went to publish this article. And he said, hey, this is a fake fossil. It's made up. It's 2 different animals, maybe 5 different animals. And so he was shocked that 2 months later, they didn't pull the article. In fact, they did a press conference. We found a missing link, even though he had just told them that it's fake fossil. Now that speaks volumes to this field. You wouldn't need to go put your head out on a chopping board if you had all these other proofs of bird evolution. You have no proofs, so now you're going to make something up and see if you can get away with it for a while. Little did they know that Dr. Tim Rowe would tell the truth to our film crew and show it in detail how they made up the fossil and why you didn't have steel, because there's little steel fragments from the plaster mortar in this fossil. You shouldn't have steel fragments, So that's a problem. The next problem was that after this story was overturned, that BBC did a follow-up story, and it's called The Dinosaur That Fooled the World. I'd recommend everybody watch that movie. It's on the internet for free. And the scientists from BBC went back to Liaoning, China, where this fossil was found, and he found there was an industry in the town where they're creating fake fossils. In other words, you go up into the office and they say to you, what you want? And you say, well, I'd like a flying dinosaur, And so they would bring out pieces of dinosaurs and pieces of bird fossils and put them together for you. And by the way, you can't tell that they're fake. I've been fooled 3 times by these on the Confucius ornis, and then this one too, Archaeopteryx languinensis. You can't tell that they're fake. They're so good. They're so good until someone CAT scans them. And so there is an industry in Liaoning where they found the National Geographic fossil. This industry creates fake fossils, and it's still there today. The next problem is that nearly all the, quote, feathered dinosaurs here's the feathered dinosaurs that they found. They're all about the size of a bird. Some evolution scientists said they're not flying dinosaurs or feathered dinosaurs. They're just flightless birds, So that all the feathered dinosaurs, so-called feathered dinosaurs, come from, guess where? Liaoning, China. The same place where they had the fake industry. So unless you can get to each of these fossils and CAT scan it, which you can't, and inspect it, which would be necessary, you have to consider all the fossils from Liaoning and all the fossils from China are bogus until proven otherwise. Why would you even go there? The next problem is that all these fossils are younger than Archaeopteryx. These flightless birds, they think could not fly. And so why would you have a flightless bird below Archaeopteryx? You're trying to go from flightless to flight, and now they're finding Archaeopteryx is here, a good bird that can fly, and then in Liaoning, above it, there are flightless birds. That makes absolutely no sense. Why you would even pay attention to these fossils, I have no idea. And these are inaccessible. Here's the next problem, is that modern types of birds like ducks, avocets, a whole list of birds that are modern have been found with dinosaurs, with T-Rex. So how could a dinosaur evolve into a modern bird, if the modern birds are with T-Rex? And next problem is that birds evolved from the wrong type of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are broken into saurischans and ornithischians. Birds have bird hips. The meat-eating dinosaurs have lizard hips. You wouldn't think a bird would evolve from a lizard hip dinosaur. You would think it would evolve from a bird hip dinosaur. I know there's different ways of thinking about this, but it's just basically a problem. And so, yeah, that's your best proof of evolution. We just decimated the whales. We just decimated the birds, unless you can step up to the plate and give me the fossils from 200 million years to 150, showing me that evolution. Your two best proofs of evolution are embarrassing. Let's just say it that way. Now, I want to go to the last best proof of evolution. That is that a small ape-like creature evolved into a human. And we just released a 3-book series on human evolution, volume 3, 4, and 5, that we did the interviews with these scientists over the last 27 years. And I just want to say that this best proof of evolution has just, you just wait. I'll just show it to you and you make up your own mind what the status is of this. The first problem with this idea that humans evolved from apes is that we documented 100, we meaning Debbie and I, our film crew, interviewing these scientists, Johansson, Broom, and all these leaders in evolution, F. Clark Howell. We documented 150 frauds carried out by human evolution scientists. These were not mistakes like, oh, I identified the bone wrong or I mismeasured it. These are where they knowingly altered the fossils, changed the fossil, altered the photograph, altered the diagram. And there's 150 of these by scientists who worked in this field. That speaks volumes. That, like, really, this is your best proof and you have this many frauds in this field? For example, this diagram that was in Time Life magazine, Time Life book series called Early Man. We interviewed the scientist who made this diagram, and he admitted to us, and we documented that 13 of these 14 animals in this diagram are frauds. Like, these 5 aren't ape men, these are humans, these are Homo sapiens, and he admitted to that. And this one, this one, this one, and this one, and this one, he admitted that they were not ancestors of humans, and yet he put them in the road to Homo sapiens. And there were 3 other scientists that contributed a few of the frauds. All 13 of these are frauds, and the one that's not a fraud was actually not an ape man, but it was just a mistake, so I didn't put an X over it. So this is your best proof of all of evolution being true, and yet now we have all these frauds that really cause you to question who did these frauds and what fossils are involved. Well, we just showed you the Time Life chart. Toomai has 4 frauds involved. Lucy has 3 frauds. Homo habilis has 3 frauds. Turkana boy has 2 frauds. Prometheus has 30 frauds with it. Tong Child has 2 frauds. Zinjanthropus by Louis Leakey had 2 frauds. Neanderthal Man from La Chapelle aux Saints, Marcel Boule, did 4 frauds to create that one. Nebraska Man wasn't a mistake of a pig's tooth, it was a fraud, 2 frauds. 1470 has a fraud. Paranthropus, Homo niger, Australis americanus. Haeckel's embryos were frauds. Haeckel's ape-man comparisons were frauds. 150 frauds carried out by a virtual who's who of evolution scientists. Don Johansson, frauds. Philip Tobias, frauds. Michel Brunet, frauds. Raymond Dart, frauds. Leakey, Howell, Broom, Haeckel, Boole, Osborne, Matthew. These are well-known leaders in this field, and they did fraud. The second problem, and I don't know how many problems I have with this field. I think there's 10 problems in this field. And just one of these might be enough for you to say, okay, evolution's over. But I want to just kind of bury this whole thing. So I'm going to give you all the reasons you should not believe in human evolution. The second problem is that many scientists do not allow all interested parties to inspect their ape-men fossils. In other words, the fossils that they say are true ape-men, they won't let you in to see them. Unless you're their friend and you're going to write positively about their fossil, no, you can't see the fossils. Now, I only became aware of this because we're shooting this documentary for national television, and we tried to approach scientist after scientist to see the fossils, the originals. We don't want copies. We want to see the originals because there's problems with these copies. And you would be surprised which fossils you are not allowed to see. Even if you're a national film crew. Watch this. Toomai, it was just announced in 2001, the great ape man from Chad. And we interviewed Dr. Brunet in France, in Paris. When we're done with the interview, we asked him, Dr. Michelle Brunet, can we photograph the copies of Toomey's skull on your desk? No. Oh, that's odd. Well, can you provide us photographs of the Toomey skull? No. Oh, can you provide us a cast of the Toomey skull? No. Can you give us copies of the CAT scan? No. You mean you're promoting this, but you won't let anybody see this fossil? And it wasn't just us. We found out the evolution scientists are not allowed to see it. In fact, he was hiding things like the femur, et cetera, et cetera. So we flew all the way over to Paris just to not have a photograph of his fossils. I got around that, but and that's in episode 8. But that's ridiculous. After 20 years, you can't see the fossil. Littlefoot, we flew to South Africa. He wouldn't let us see the fossil. Homo naledi and Sadiba, Berger, we flew down there to interview him. We had it all set up. When we get there, he said, no, you can't photograph the fossils. Lucy, I've tried 6 times in different circumstances, different people. Can we get photos of the original fossils? No. Can we see the original fossils? No. Can you provide us copies of the original fossils? No. No, 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 no. You cannot see the original fossils. Why do they not want you to see the original fossils? Because they know as soon as someone gets in there that they're going to see that, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem. Du Bois, who found Pithecanthropus, hid his fossil, which was, Pithecanthropus erectus, which turned out to be Homo erectus. He hid his fossils 24 years. While he's promoting it at the World's Fair, and I think it was 1900 or 1904, World's Fair in 1900, he has carte blanche to say whatever he wants. No one can defeat him because they won't get access to his fossils. And same with Neanderthal. There's good luck trying to see a Neanderthal real fossil. I have worked very hard on that. Museum after museum will not allow me or our film crew to see the original, even though they said we would be able to when we got there. They said you had to pay some money. Okay, we'll pay the money. No, you still can't see them. Turkana is inaccessible. They won't let you put the lower jaw to the face because they know it doesn't fit because they altered the skull. Orion, we tried to see that original fossil, and Martin Pickford wouldn't let us see it. La Chapelle aux Saints, the guy who did Neanderthal from La Chapelle aux Saints, the one that promoted Neanderthal being an ape-man bent over, he hid that fossil during his entire career. Scientists from the Smithsonian, Dr. Aleš Hrdlička from the Smithsonian, took a steamliner, an ocean liner, over to Paris 3 different times. I think it was 1923, 26, 27, 3 different times. He gets there and asks Dr. Boole, I'd like to see the Neanderthal man. He said, well, there it is, but you can't touch it and you can't inspect it. That's documented. And so it goes, Piltdown was hidden for 40 years and that turned out to be a fake. And Ardipithecus, you can't see that. So inaccessible means that this is not science, because science means it has to be reproducible, that another scientist can go and look at the fossils and come to the same conclusion. And yet inaccessible means that it's non-scientific. In other words, human evolution is more like a club. It's not a science. Get off that idea that it's a science. It's a club. The third problem with human evolution is that 237 species of ape men have been overturned. I've documented this in volume 4 in my book series, and here's a page from the book series. There were so many overturned ape men, which speaks that this field is not reliable. If they have ape men that get overturned, that we had to break them up into like 9 categories. Like these were ape men made out of non-primate bones, and these were ape men made out of living human beings like black people and Eskimos and American Indians. And these were ape men made out of bones that were recently buried, like grandma or grandpa's grave. They dig them up and said, oh, this is a new ape man. This is Diprothroma platensis, things like that. And so we have a list for you of 237 ape men that have been overturned, which speaks very poorly for this field. And if this is the best you got, I would say this is problematic. The next problem with human evolution is that 42,000 times the human evolution experts have identified stone tools that turned out to be just rocks. 42,000 times. 42,000 times. In other words, they collected these and they say, oh no, this is a grinder and this is a anvil and this is a scraper. And years later, they would come along and say, no, those are just rocks. Here's Raymond Dart's famous, axes. And no, that's just a stalactite. These were overturned. A next problem in human evolution is the hundreds of bone tools have been overturned, where they find a bone and they said, no, this was not just a bone. This is a tool that was used by an ape man. My favorite is Raymond Dart, who wrote this book, The Osteodonto-Keratic Culture for Homo Prometheus. And this is his page. This is not my work. This is his. And he says, this is an ape man saw. You can see how the ape man would have held it. And he would saw with the teeth. No, that was just an ordinary antelope jaw. And he would say, here's an ape man scrub brush. No, that's just an antelope upper jaw. And here's an ape man pickaxe. No, that's just a horn attached to a skull of a bovid. The sixth problem with human evolution is there are documented thousands of mistaken age assignments to the ape man. In other words, you can switch these dates around to make any story you want. Let me just show you a couple. Here's Nebraska man. That was the Nebraska tooth, that's just bogus. Anyway, when he first wrote it, he said it was 1 million years old. And then as each article came out, it then changed to 1 million to 2 million years old, then 3 million years old, 4 million years old. No, it's up to 5.3 million years old. Then he said, no, it's 5.3 million years old. See, that you can just change the dates any way you want and just keep doing studies until you get a date that you like. Here's Mount Hermoso. The Herdlicka found out that this site that's supposed to be 5 million years old, he said, no, it's less than 600 years old. This is a recently buried human. So there's thousands of those. And then the seventh problem with human evolution is that most current ape men are fragmentary. You would think that if evolution is true, and if human evolution was your best example, you would go into the museums and see not some partial skulls, you would see complete skeletons starting with whatever you want, tumai or whatever, and just go through, because it's been 150 years. We've been searching for this, and we have lots of complete skeletons. But you shouldn't have just fragmentary things and saying that's an ape man, because you can interpret them any way you want. For example, this is the most complete Homo habilis skeleton. Well, you call that an ape man. I could have somebody else say that's a monkey, and I could have somebody else say, no, that's a human. You could interpret that any way. This is terrible. This is your best proof. Here's Orion tugenensis. You're saying this is an ape man. Okay, well, that's one of your best proofs? Wow. And here's another one, Ardipithecus. It's famous, but you start looking at the colored, that's the bones that have been found, and then the gray is where they haven't found it. They don't have any part of the thorax. The skull is in fragments. There's the hip bone here is missing. It's terrible. So the current ape men, and this is the best proof of evolution, that the current ape men on display at museums, most of them or all of them are either fraud-based, fragmentary, or inaccessible. And you can just read the list. The fraud-based ones are Tumai is fraud-based, Lucy is fraud-based, Homo habilis is fraud-based, Turkana is fraud-based, Neanderthal is fraud-based, Homo rudolfensis is fraud-based. If you don't believe that, read volume 4. The fragmentary ones, you see the list. Yeah, Tumai did have the skull and the femur, et cetera, et cetera. Are the inaccessible? A bunch of these are inaccessible. And if this is your best proof, knowing that everything else in the fossil record is doesn't work with evolution, and this is your best, you better rethink this, because you've been told a story by people who want to believe this, and they're willing to lie and cheat to make their story work, even do frauds. And this is terrible. And then here's the next problem. It just came out this year that, they always say that chimp DNA is 98% similar to human DNA. And this just came out in April in Nature. And it's not 98% similar. We're only 85% similar to the closest animal on Earth. In other words, here's from the Smithsonian. Chimpanzees are 98% similar. Remember this one too, gorillas, 98% similar. That's what they told us since 1974. And the thought was, look, we're so closely related, that means we share so many genes. That means we're just, a few mutations away from going from a chimp to a human. That's turned out to be not true. And here it is again. So the closest human ancestor is the chimp and the gorilla. But here's this article that came out in Nature in April 2025, and they had the analysis of the thing, but only deep in this article, and it's not even in the article, it's in the supplement, it gives you this quote: autosomal divergence between the gorilla and the human is up to 27, here's the number, 27% difference between a gorilla and a human. This is in the supplement data. It's not 98.4, it's 27% difference. And here's for the chimp, they said autosomal divergence for the chimp was 13.3% for these gaps, plus there's other single nucleotide differences. The 13% difference, here's the number right here in this chart, but they hit it in the chart. So we are not 98% similar to chimps, we're 85% similar, or you could say it's genetically different 15%. That doesn't sound like evolution if that is the absolutely closest animal on Earth that is supposed to be our relative. And for the gorillas, it's 27% difference. And the number of difference in letters, the difference in letters between a chimp and a human, the difference in the DNA is 450 million letters of DNA difference. 450 million letters of DNA that would have to change in a period of 5 million years. That would have to be in the exact proper location. That's impossible. And here's for the gorilla, our second closest relative, 800 million letters of difference. These aren't even closely related. Before I turn it back over to Brian, I just want to thank you and tell you that all of this that I talked about today is documented in the book series. And it's volume 1, Evolution, the Grand Experiment, Living Fossils, and then we just came out with volume 3 and 4 on human evolution. And these are color books with 3,400 photographs, that most of them are my wife's photographs. So these are very easy to read. They're for the non-scientists. You can pick them up, read them. They're just so enjoyable, and they're meant for you. That's what I wrote them for, not for the scientists. Although scientists would appreciate them, but I put all the language into someone who's a non-scientist can understand it. And you can see those at our website, The Grand Experiment. Now, if you want to see the frauds, you should watch the DVD series, and it's episode 5, 6, 7, and 8 covers the 150 frauds in detail, beautiful graphics. This was shot on location in 16 countries, and it's just high quality, PBS quality. The episodes 1 and 2 played on many networks already, 7 networks. So you can get that on DVD, but if you're younger and you don't have a DVD player, you can get that as streaming video. You can just rent them from our website. It's very inexpensive to rent to watch these episodes, or you can just get permanent passes to watch them. But I would highly encourage you as a family or a viewer to watch the 8-part video series. It's really fantastic to watch these evolution scientists just admitting it on camera and sweating on camera that they made this stuff up. And then finally, and most importantly, is that this is all intended for the young people. And unless we can get this material to the young people, in other words, teach it to them in 7th grade, 8th grade, you could teach this to them in 7th through 12th grade. We have this 4-semester curriculum. That'd be 2 years. You could do 7th and 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade and 10th grade. And it goes through all 4 of our books, and it goes through the entire video series. And if your kids watch the series and take these 4 semesters, I guarantee they'll be able to stand up to their professors and tell them, why evolution doesn't work. And what's more importantly is they'll be able to know internally why evolution doesn't work, that there has to be a God. There's no other way this could have come about. And without this, the world just sliding away because everybody's believing in evolution, which is not true. It's been disproved. With this, we could turn this ship around. So, but we don't have kids. We don't have school. You have to do this. You have to take this to your schools, your family, your friends. If you're a grandparent, you could even go through it with your grandkids during the summer, whatever. But I'd highly encourage you to do that. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Thank you for letting me have the time here to make the full presentation, Brian. And I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Carl. I appreciate that. That was a very, very comprehensive presentation. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was phenomenal. I like the fact that you brought up one of my favorite movies of all time, Jurassic Park. I actually read the book like 50 million times I mean, read it from front cover to back cover. I recently listened to an audio book of Jurassic Park as well, not too long ago. Um, I would say probably a couple weeks ago, I finished off and I'm actually listening through an audio book of The Lost World, which I also read in school. So I really enjoyed Jurassic Park. A little behind the scenes information on that movie. Okay, the book, the author, I think Michael Crichton was an evolutionist, and he really wanted to emphasize the idea that dinosaurs were evolved from birds. And so in the movie, they were trying to emphasize that a lot. And of course, Grant actually makes a logical fallacy. He said when he talks about the velociraptor at the beginning of the movie, he says even the word velociraptor means bird of prey. That's actually a nominal fallacy. It assumes that just because evolutionists are the ones that are naming these things. You mentioned that earlier that they just kind of reshuffle the names and redefine these terms. But interesting enough, that same scene that you showed where the kids and stuff were hiding from the Velociraptor, when the two Velociraptors came in, originally in the post-credit scene, they had them sticking their tongues out like reptiles. And then they said, "Oh no, we can't do that. We're trying to make these things look like birds." So they had to alter that in the post-credit scene so that they didn't, because when they came in, they were sticking their tongues out at each other, like a reptile would, like a snake or something. So they had to alter that because they were trying to make it look like birds. Very much so. So so that's why they did that. But I thought that was funny, and that's in the same scene that you showed an image of. Of course, that's when they were still looking for the kids, but they came in through the door, and I thought that was funny. But yeah, interesting enough, when I read the book or listened to the audiobook, because I was in a Christian in high school, I wasn't familiar with things like living fossils and things like that. But when I listened to the audiobook, I suddenly started finding out that Michael Crichton actually mentioned finding of them finding living fossils and things like that. So I was like, wow, he actually mentioned that. Of course, they didn't show all that in the movie, but um, but yeah, I enjoyed the book Jurassic Park, but it does try to emphasize evolutionary ideas a lot, and so did the movies. But yeah, okay, let's first start our first question off. How do you define a transitional fossil? How does this differ from the definition used by evolutionary paleontologists? Now, if I remember correctly, the way it seems to be, I deal with a lot of online critics, and it seems to me like the online critics are defining transitional as like any similarities. So even if it's a fully formed feature, they will say, "Well, that looks similar to fish. Like if it has fully formed gills, therefore it must be a transitional feature." And stuff like that. So it almost like they're redefining what the word transitional means. And I don't know if evolutionary paleontologists quite describe it that way, or is that more of an online thing where people that don't specialize in the area are defining it that way.
Well, let me give you the real answer. This probably won't help you in your discussions with your critics, but this is the real answer. First of all, just because animals have similarities does not make them even related. For example, there is the dolphin, which is a mammal in the ocean, the dolphin you see on the shore. And then there was a fossil reptile called ichthyosaur, which looked like a mammal, but it's a reptile. Both have a dorsal fin, both have tail for swimming, both have pectoral fins. And if you had been around when the ichthyosaurs were around, you would have trouble probably, distinguish them. They'd look the same, but they're totally unrelated. So the fact that two animals share similarities means nothing, okay? Second, I'm going to give you a second example of this. There is a mole in Australia that looks like the mole in North America. The mole in North America is a placental, like your cat or dog, or human, they have placenta. But the mole in Australia is a marsupial. It has a pouch like a kangaroo. And even though these two moles, if you brought them in side by side, they would look exactly the same. Every trait is the same. You know how moles have those flappers in the front on their feet, the fur, the size, everything. You would say, oh, these are two closely related animals. And yet they're not. The placental mole, the one here in North America, is closer to a horse because a horse is also placental, whereas the marsupial mole is closer to a kangaroo. And the two moles aren't related. So just by looking at similarities is a waste of your time. You have to look at a series of animals over time in chronological order and in size proportion. You can't squeeze them to be the same size to be a valid test of evolution. You're trying to get to the bottom of this. Is there transitional fossils or not? And so you want to start with two animals that don't look similar before you start. See, here's the problem with humans evolving from apes. A human skeleton and ape skeleton, they're completely different animals, but they kind of are about the same number of bones, same height. That's a very poor choice if you're wanting to see if evolution is true or not. If you want to see if evolution is true or not, you should take a crazy animal like a flying mammal, like a bat, and find the transitional fossils. If evolution's true, you should be able to find all the proofs there on these animals when you start out with two animals widely separated, and they're widely separated. Or you could do a pterosaur. One flies, one, and the ground lizard doesn't. That's how you test evolution. But there's going to be people all day long that will pick out two similar animals or two animals that have similarities and say, yeah, this proves that they're closely related. And it's really, I find it a very unsatisfying discussion. It's like a waste of my time. Why are you wasting my time? If you want to get to the bottom of this, let's pull out the disparate animals. Prove it with those, because it'll be there just as well. It'll be starting out with an ape and a human. So it doesn't help you in your discussions online, but it is the truth. That is the way to approach this.
Yeah. A lot of times, if you try to define transitional as simply similarities, then you got other things like common design that can also account for similarities.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right.
So, would you say a better definition of transitional fossil, one that is exclusive to the claims of evolution, would be, like you said, intermediate steps, like a chain of sequential, gradual processes over millions of years. Um, Now, of course, a argument that has come since Charles Darwin's day is the idea that, well, the fossil evidence is just incomplete. But after about 150 years of searching, you think that there would be enough fossils? I mean, you talk about like 1,000 fossils of bats that have been found, and yeah, what was it, 1,000 pterodons that have been found or something like that. And yet you would expect, even if you had some gaps, like as a result of missing information, you would still have enough of a set to be able to prove a sequential, gradual changes in those directions. And those are what is
That's
missing.
correct.
So, okay. So you would define transitional fossil as those intermediate steps between like the major groups of and you mentioned phyla and the Cambrian explosion. I really like that because there's no evolutionary precursor to that at all. And how do
Right.
critics respond to the geologic column situation? Have you encountered?
What do you mean by that question? Re-ask that question so I can understand where you're
Oh
going
yeah.
with it.
Well, the obviously the Cambrian explosion shows a complete explosion, if you will, of complex organisms, even soft body organisms. You mentioned in your video all the major phyla being found in the Cambrian explosion, and with no evolutionary precursor to those organisms. Now, obviously, creationists have been talking about the Cambrian explosion for a long time. How do critics react and respond to that particular argument?
Well, the evolutionists who don't know the field would say, no, the fossils in the lowest layer, the Ediacaran layer, evolved into the fossils in the Cambrian layer. And there's weird fossils in the Ediacaran layer, and they evolved into the Cambrian layer. And that's not true because when you interview the experts on the Cambrian explosion, and we interviewed them for our book one, they'll tell you that the animals in the Ediacaran layer, the lowest layer with multicellular animals, those animals aren't the ancestors to the animals in the Cambrian. This is a set of animals, this is a set of animals, and like this soft-bodied creature here did not evolve into this fish here. They're just a bunch of animals, and people that don't want to know the truth will just say, I think that they're there. But then you just have to ask them, please, just for the sake of argument, can you lay out the evolutionary steps for corals? And here's the first coral that we see from Carl's diagram. You know, and so we see the soft coral, the sea pen. Show me the intermediates, because this is about you showing it to me. Brian, if evolution is true, you should be able to go into any museum today and say, okay, which hallway are we going to walk down? And they would have 7 hallways at the museum. And this hallway is going to be for corals, the evolution of corals. And they'd take you to the end of the hallway, there'd be a bacteria fossil, and then they would have, these hallways would be, hundreds of yards long, and they would show you all the steps getting up to the first sea pen. And then say, well, what do you want to do today? Well, let's go see the evolution of this fish, this first fish. We'll walk down to the end of the hall. We'll start with the bacteria fossils and we'll work our way up to this fish. It would be thousands upon thousands of intermediate animals because the bacteria is just a bacteria. The fish has eyes, a mouth, an anus, intestines, a heart, a circulatory system, muscles, vertebrae, spinal cord, fins. All those would have to be developing over time. And it would take you a long time to go through that museum exhibit. But here's the problem. There's no museum today that has any such exhibit. They just show you the coral and they just show you the sponge. They have no idea where they came from. No idea.
Right. And what would you say? Have you heard this argument where the evolutionists would try to argue, oh, well, there's a hierarchy pattern here. And of course, as you showed in your video, there's a big difference between what is actually shown in the fossil evidence versus what is being claimed about the fossil evidence. So, have you heard of people trying to argue from what they call a hierarchy? Like you find fossils in certain strata layers, and therefore that shows an evolutionary progression.
Well, That would be that would be what I would ask them. I say, okay, you believe in evolution, and that means the animals in the lowest layer evolved into the next animals, into the next layer, into the next layer, into the next layer. Perfect. Let's all go out there. Where do you want to go? And you show us in one, like a Grand Canyon kind of situation or any other rock layers where you could start. Let's start at the lowest, and which animal are we going to follow? And show us the steps to get to this first fish. They don't have anything. All they have is a fish. And when you ask them to do it in the real world, in a rock layer, to show me evolution of large changes, there's nothing, because they have to assemble fossils from all over the world onto a piece of paper to say that this animal evolved into this animal, into this animal. You can't, if you raise the bar and make them do it right in front of you in these rock layers, it gets even worse. They have nothing, except they'll show you two shellfish that kind of look alike, and they'll say this one evolved into this. And I say that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about major evolutionary steps. That would be the proof of evolution, not two shellfish looking the same.
Right. You can see that in the modern world, that's like looking at different breeds of dogs and then trying to claim that that all life is related. So,
That's right. That's right.
but one of the things on the hierarchy thing is that it's quite not. It's actually very much not like the way it's being claimed by a lot of online evolutionists. I mean, things are actually found in other layers. They're just trying to reorder it. I've heard that sometimes, like in the dinosaur layers, if they find a dinosaur in a different layer, they will just classify that layer as that dinosaur layer, simply because this is something that I heard recently from someone he had an interview on Standing for Truth. But he said that they just reclassify, I think it was Bodie Hodge, said that they were just reclassify that as a dinosaur layer. So it's like even though it's technically found in a different layer or different strata or whatever, they will set their classify as that because it's a dinosaur, and a dinosaur is supposed to be only in those particular layers. And of course, you got living fossils that are also found in places that they shouldn't be found in, but they are, and that sort of thing. And so, do you see that this hierarchy is kind of made up in the way that evolutionists is describing it, at least?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. And you can find in any layer, if you're at a dig site, you can find a fossil that shouldn't be there. Like you could find a trilobite in a Eocene layer, and the trilobite should have been extinct long before the Eocene. Well, they would say, well, that trilobite fell out of a fossil cliff and got remixed and ended up in this Eocene layer where it shouldn't be, but it wasn't alive then. It was just a fossil that got reburied. See, they can get around anything with that logic. You can reclassify animals that shouldn't be there as, quote, remixing, that it got into that layer by remixing. And so it becomes very soft. It's not like, how could you disprove this if you can reclassify or rename or redate layers?
How do you respond to the claim that we have thousands of transitional fossils today? Obviously, we would say that's not actually accurate, but what would be your response to someone saying that, oh, we have thousands of transitional fossils?
So I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is the point of this show. What they're talking about is two animals that are similar, that they assume one evolved into another. But you run into the problem of the lining up 5 different kinds of bass, or lining up 5 different kinds of canids, or lining up 5 different kinds of pterosaurs. And you say, oh, this pterosaur evolved into this pterosaur, which evolved into this pterosaur. So they can believe that, and there's nothing you could make them, there's nothing you could say that would make them stop believing it. But it's without weight. if this is true, you say you have thousands, let's go back to the big transition. Show me 1,000 transitions in the bacteria to fish. Just show me 1,000. I'm not going to ask for all 100,000. Or show me 1,000 transition from a bacteria to the first shellfish, and just show me 1,000 of the first bacteria going to the first worm. I want to see those thousands of transitions. You're just picking out animals, you being the evolution scientist, you're just picking out animals that are kind of similar or share similarities that you hope or believe evolved one into another. But we don't care about that because it could be, you could be being fooled. They could just be, they could be variations within a species, et cetera, et cetera. We want to see what you say evolution is, macroevolution, large changes. We want to see a a bacteria changing into a fish. And I would just say, okay, let's start. Let's start. I'll start naming the animal groups. Start with the fish, the vertebrate phyla. Show me the 1,000 transitions getting us to the first fish. And I would hold their feet to that fire.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask the next question. I know you answered this in the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it so that way we can kind of talk about it for a second because I thought that was kind of interesting what you said in there in the presentation. And you did spend a few minutes on this. Have you encountered any museum professionals or paleontologists who admit to the lack of transitional fossils? What did they say? Go ahead and just kind of discuss it real quick.
Yeah, when we interviewed the Cambrian explosion experts, they were befuddled. They could not explain why you don't see the transition. And when we interviewed the dinosaur evolution expert, they couldn't explain why the animals were missing to show dinosaur evolution. And each of these groups, the expert who actually knew the fossil record for that group would have a hard time coming with a plausible explanation why those transitional fossils are absent. That's what's missing. A lot of these people that talk online, they don't know what they're talking about on a particular group of animals. You have to get to the experts. The experts tell a whole different story than what the textbooks show. The experts will tell you, no, it's very problematic. But in the evolution books, they have the lines, the connecting lines, it's all there. We have transitional fossils. No. Well, just show it to us. Let's just get started.
Right. Um, uh, Interesting enough that like a lot of critics will sit there and say that most of our DNA is biologically non-functional, and there's stuff out of the evolutionary community, like the INCO project, that actually showed that that 80% has been known to biologically functional, and they even warn against assuming that it has no biological functionality simply because you don't know what it is. And most evolutionary scientists today now accepts that most of our DNA is biologically functional, although they would try to argue for degrees of functionality. But you still hear a lot of online skeptics echo that flawed, outdated concept of junk DNA that most of our DNA is biologically non-functional or virtually non-functional, and it's just not the case. I like the fact that during the or toward the end of the presentation, you talked about that paper that was published this year. I've talked about it on my channel. I thought that was awesome. It was published early this year in Nature. Of them finding like sixth grade apes, including chimpanzees, were compared, fully sequenced genomes were compared of these sixth grade apes was compared to the fully sequenced human genome, and they found all of these differences between humans and apes. And what they found between chimpanzees and humans was made humans and chimpanzees 85% similar instead of 96 to 99% similar. The way skeptics have are tried to respond to this, they they accept the paper because it's in an evolutionary peer reviewed paper. Nature's one of the top peer reviewed publications in the world, so they accept it. But then they say, "Oh, well, all of these are in the repetitive regions of the genome. That they're not really biologically relevant." And it's like, yes, they are. I actually did some research on that and found that there's essential elements that are found in these repetitive DNA, and it's not junk or biologically irrelevant. It's extremely essential. They assume that if it's non-protein coding, that therefore it has no value, but that's not the case. It's got,
That's not the
gene
case.
regulation, right? It's gene regulation. You got stuff that's important for embryology or development and things like that, and immune system. I mean, just it's or reproduction or yeah, but it's there's a lot of important fundamental elements that are in non-protein coding regions, and things like that. It's really really vital, and so they're trying to minimize this result, like it's not really that important because it's in the repetitive regions. Um, but the reality is it is actually very important. It's extremely important. And but this actually changes. This is like a game changer, because this is something that creationists have been saying for a long time, and now you
Mhm.
got a respected source that's respected by evolutionary community, published very recently this year, and is saying, oh no, chimps and humans are really 85% similar. In fact, that was so obvious in the paper that the writers had to invoke a rescue device and assume rapid evolution had occurred in these differences. But I don't know if you
Yeah,
read the paper or not, but
oh yeah, it was very boring. And the scientists at ICR predicted this, I think 10 or 15 years ago, that the human and chimps differed by 15%. I didn't believe him because nobody else was backing him up. And I just thought he was just shooting from the hip. I think his name is Brian Thomas, or no, I don't know. Jeff
Dr. Jeffrey
Tompkins, I think is his
Tompkins,
name.
Dr. Jeffrey
Yeah.
Tompkins.
And he should get a Nobel Prize. He and the scientists from London should get a Nobel Prize that they spotted that 10, 15 years before the DNA was all sequenced up. And nobody gave him credit. He should be given credit, a Nobel Prize, some grand scientific award that he predicted this before it was even known. You know, that's really amazing on his part. Hats off to him because he did the research and figured it out. I don't know how he did it, but that's brilliant.
And Dr. Richard Buggs, the one you were just mentioning as well, is from London. He actually also figured out 85%. And actually, his was like a low 84%. So it was like it just kind of raised up just a little bit when they sequenced the rest of the genome. But he actually factored in underlinable regions of the genome. And what Richard Buggs said, it was also correct. And he was an evolutionary geneticist. So it was interesting that we had somebody on the creationist side, we had somebody on the evolutionist side, and the evolutionary community said, "Oh, those two are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about." You had people online like Erica from Guts of Gibbon that would try to bash Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins' reputation because he said things that she didn't agree with. And now this paper comes out and it vindicated that. I remember Dr. Rob Carter, who didn't even quite agree with all of Tompkins's math, actually put on his Twitter account or in his or not Twitter but Facebook. It was his Facebook group, and he put Tompkins vindicated. That's how he put it.
Hey, that is
Tompkins vindicated.
totally vindicated. I'm so proud of him. I am so proud of him.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. But all right. My next question is: do you believe the fossil record supports stasis and sudden appearance rather than gradual changes? Can you give some examples? So, like it just kind of just appear. I know you mentioned the Cambrian explosion, but could you maybe adopt some other examples as well? Because you really talked about Cambrian explosion quite extensively in your talk.
Yes, I'd like to address the word stasis. Stasis means that you go to a lower rock layer and you find an animal that's in all the layers above it. And so it didn't live for just that one rock layer's time, but lived for, according to evolutionist scientists, tens or hundreds of millions of years old. And, stasis is a rescue device for evolutionists when they see a modern animal in a lower layer. They say, "Oh, it's just stasis. It didn't need to evolve." It's very peculiar because Darwin's whole idea was animals kept out competing, and the strongest survive, and the weakest get destroyed. But you have stasis in the fossil record, which means an animal appears and then doesn't change all the way up, or two-thirds of the way up. But here is the best proof and demonstration of stasis, and it's also a prediction of creation model. Creation model would say that all the animals that were ever made by God were all mixed together in a flood, and they were distributed over the layers. And when God created animals, he didn't just create extinct animals. He created the ones that are still living and the extinct. And so you would think, if creation was true, that you would find mixed together with extinct animals the living animals. And here is a factoid for you, is that every layer, starting with the Ediacaran all the way to the top to the Holocene, every layer has modern appearing animals. Every layer. I could show that to you some other day, but I can show you the pictures of the fossils that we took. Every layer has modern appearing animals. So that means that there's stasis throughout the geological column. That means suggests evolution didn't occur. And that suggests that a creation with a flood occurred, because that's predicted by creation and a flood. Creation and flood predicts that God made all the animals. There was a flood, everything got mixed together. Some of the animals went extinct, but there would be modern animals in every layer. And that is, in fact, what we find in the fossil record.
Right, and we actually do have a video on that if anyone wants to see it on living fossils, where we do talk about how you reference modern animals in every layer. So if anyone wants to see that, they can welcome to look that up. I know that there has been what was this other one? It was also called an explosion. I don't know, Permian or something like that. I can't remember. But it was like a wide extinction event that occurred, and you see all these complex organisms in the same layer. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I can't
Well,
remember.
there's
Go ahead.
according to evolution scientists, there's all these extinction events, like at the end of the Cretaceous, at the end of the Permian. There's, I think, five major extinction events where below that layer, there's one type of animal. Above that layer, that animal's not found. And there's a whole bunch of animals that don't go above this line. But it's just, I don't know. It's I'm not impressed by the data when you see the bigger problem of modern animals in every layer.
Right. All right. Um, What role do assumptions and worldview play in interpreting fossils as transitional versus distinct created kinds? Do you see that worldview interpretation? I know fossils are extremely interpreted. And of course, as you mentioned, the fossil evidence is far more limited than a lot of people would like to believe it is. And of course, the conditions that some of these fossils are found in is terrible. We'll probably get into a little bit into the hominids, where the ape fossils, got hips, they're found crushed if they're found at all, and so you've got really poor conditions of these fossils as well. But obviously, there's a lot of interpretation that goes into interpreting the fossils. How would you perceive that? How much do you think their worldview affects how they're looking at this? And of course, some of these guys have great imaginations. They can be very creative with the information that's missing. And unfortunately, that makes people think, oh, they must have evidence that supports that area, and it turns out they don't. So, how
Mhm.
would you see that? I mean, how would you see how much that impacts their judgment on that and what they're claiming?
Well, it's everything. Because by and large, evolution scientists are atheists or agnostics. They do not believe in God. And by and large, and I can't pull up a statistic for you, but by and large, atheists in high school went into evolutionary fields like paleontology to support their own view of atheism, that there is no God, this is just a natural process. So these scientists that by and large run the museums and the universities are atheists first, then scientists. They're not scientists first, and then, oh, I'm such a scientist, I became an atheist. They're atheists first and became a scientist. Well, it just blinds you, unless you're really applying the rules of science, having null hypothesis, making predictions, and being willing to shoot down your own ideas, and most scientists in this field are not, then everything fits. Every fact you find fits, and there's nothing that can disrupt you. But that's not science, that's just a religious belief. The theory of evolution is more like a religion than a science. It's a religious belief. It's not the science, because if it was a science, let's go look at the fossils and just show us these fossils on the Cambrian explosion. If it's a science, let's just go see the bats evolve. If it's a science, let's see how the DNAs compare up. Now, it's not. It's a religion. Yeah.
Right. And they keep on, like, if you find, oh well, we you can't have humans and apes, the split happening 6 to 7 million years ago, when you got the mutation rates, and then you got 85% difference, and so now you've got to sit there and try to push the timeline back or come up with some kind of other rescue device. Do you feel, and this is actually my next question, do you feel that the public is being misled on the data here? That somehow, even if an evolutionist is trying to be honest to some degree, at the same time, all the information is just not being made available to people, and so people tend to think, get led to think that the evidence is supporting one thing when it really isn't.
Absolutely. The evolutionist scientists know that if they speak anything against the theory of evolution, that they will not be promoted, they will not be given grants, they will be shunned. And the only way to advance in their field of evolution is to say evolution is true no matter what you're studying. And that just puts them in a precarious position. An example of this, Brian, would be the Nature article that was printed in April of this year, 2025, that said that humans differed by 15% from apes. Brian, if you read that article cover to cover and then read the supplement cover to cover, went through every graph, you would probably miss the biggest fact, that humans and apes differ by 15% and humans and gorillas by 27%. You can't even see that in that article. Thank goodness for Casey Luskin at the Discovery Institute and Jeff Tompkins at the Institute of Creation Research. They spotted this in this article and they brought it to light. Otherwise, I would have never even known it was in that article. They put this information that would detract from their theory, and they hide it and put it down deep in the article, so even if you read it, you wouldn't get it. Yeah, it's terrible. So you have to actually have somebody come in with fresh eyes, like myself, Carl Werner, like Jeff Tompkins, like Casey Luskin, and just say, okay, let's look at the data, just start over. And we don't care what you believe. We just want to see the data. When you have somebody come in with fresh eyes, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
I won't
It's
like
bad.
to, right. I would like to have Casey Luskin on my channel. I actually started a new mini series called The Tompkins Controversy Revisited in light of this study. And I actually found out about the
Oh,
study also from Casey Luskin's article. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I clicked on it and I found out that this study was like this year. I said, and I even emailed Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins and said, there's a new study out. And of course, Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins was already aware of it and was already in the process of publishing things on it. So it was cool to suddenly realize. And then shortly after I became aware of it, then all of a sudden everybody else is printing things out. Answers to Genesis are doing things. And so it just went viral real fast. I even did some videos on it. It is I know it can get kind of boring because it's a bunch of details, a bunch of facts and things like that. And obviously the writers assume evolution, of course. But they do admit to there's these differences, and they do seem to be very surprised by them because, in truth, evolutionists didn't expect there to be that many differences because they thought that chimps and humans were are closest living relatives, and that sort of thing. So they didn't really expect this to have this many differences. But it did. It had a lot of differences, and these differences did impact the overall percent similarities. Because these algorithms like BLAST and NUCMER, they only look for things that are closest comparable, closest similar. They can have some differences, but you can't really have large scale differences in that, or it won't align. That's what an alignment is. It tries to find the closest similarity, and so you can't have too many differences there, or it won't align. And so that can get kind of misleading. But when you put the differences back into the data, that actually significantly decreases the overall percent similarity, and suddenly you find out, oh, chimps and humans are not as closely similar as is being claimed by the evolution community. Interesting enough, even with the 1 to 4% claim that they were making, given how large the human and chimp genomes are, that actually was a significant amount of differences, even with the 1 to 4% difference. And so 15% is just absolutely astronomical in terms of differences.
it absolutely is.
I want to ask something on supposed evolution. I thought that you did an excellent job of talking about that. Some people think there is a sequence, a transitional sequence between those walking animals and swimming whales. And obviously, you did an excellent job of debunking that idea. But would you say to someone who thinks that there are transitional forms that are just kind of like linked that led to one to the other?
Would you restate that question? I'm not sure I followed which area you were referring to.
Well, talking about well evolution, alleged well evolution, like Pakicetus, you said mentioned Ambliocetus, cetus, and things like that. And some people think there is kind of like or at least as a critic is expressing it to me, like there's a transitional sequence between one or the other, and he's wondering why that's there. And it's like, okay, because it's not, but could you give your impression on it?
Right. Well, first of all, you have to ask them, okay, if this is true, you should be able to provide us with a diagram showing in correct size of a land animal, whatever you want to choose, a dog, a cat, Pakicetus, I don't care, whatever you want to do, the deer, and evolving in the steps to what evolved into the modern whale. And you cannot change the sizes. You have to keep them proportionate. So you'd have, Pakicetus on your chart would be about that big, but then if you try to put in Basilosaurus, it'd be about this long. And all of a sudden you have these gaps if you put them in the correct size. And you also have to ask them, you cannot put them in the wrong dates. You have to put them in order dates. And they can't be animals that didn't evolve into whales. You can't, for example, Basilosaurus, it's a 60-foot long whale. it's not an ancestor to modern whales, and its legs are way back. They're usually used for copulation guide, and same with Dorudon. Dorudon is always put out there as an ancestor to whales, but Dorudon is a version of Basilosaurus, and it's a basilosaurid. And so they do not believe that Dorudon and Basilosaurus were ancestors to the modern whales. Those small legs you see are not for walking, they're for copulation guide, for grabbing the partner. So just ask them, what is it? And all of a sudden, they won't be able to name the one animal that is a land animal. Some will say it's a deer. Some will say it's Pakicetus. Some will say it's this animal, and say, look, you can't even tell us what animal evolved into a whale. And if you go to my book 1, the 3rd edition, you'll realize that Ambulocetus is bogus, Pakicetus is bogus, Rhodocetus is bogus. And so it's like, okay, show us this diagram. It should be so easy for you to get it off the internet. And they cannot produce it. And all you have to do is start calling them out on different ones, pulling facts from my book, and just say, no, Dorudon is not on that line, and Basilosaurus is shown in the incorrect size, and you're assuming parts here because they didn't find that part of the fossil. And so they'll continuously come up with new animals, and that they came up with another 5 new animals that they think are walking whales continuously. So say, fine, just put it together, and we'll have this discussion once you provide that for us with no arguable points that everybody in the evolution community agrees with you. And so they won't. Everybody's going to say, no, I don't think that's a walking whale, et cetera, et cetera. That's how I would approach them.
Right. They used to think the fins were like legs and stuff on the low fin, but they found what they call a coelacanth as an and that a living one, and they realized that it's fully functionally fins. It's not in the process of becoming legs.
Yeah, now coelacanth is a fish, not a whale. But you're right. The fish, they thought the lobe fins, when they saw coelacanth as a fossil, they thought he would be walking with his lobe fins. And then coelacanth, when they found him living, he's at 300 feet deep, and he wasn't walking on the land. Yeah, that's a very good point, Brian.
All right, Seymour.
All right, one more question.
All right. Just kind of give you your closing thoughts on this overall, in terms of people who think that there are transitional from the fossils, and when you actually look at the fossils, you realize that there's not transitional. You put in your title of your talk the rarity of this, that even the ones that are claimed are very rare, and it's clear that they're not transitional fossils. But give your closing thoughts, your overall conclusion concerning your research on this topic.
We've been at this for 160 years, trying to prove evolution with the fossil record, finding and looking for transitional fossils of one animal changing into another animal. We've been diligent because we've collected 1 billion fossils. That's a billion fossils. And yet all of the major groups, each of the phyla groups and each of the groups in invertebrates just suddenly appears without transitional forms. When someone believes they have an intermediate transitional fossil, 99 times out of 100 is what they have is 2 animals that are already similar that they think one evolved into another. That's not what evolution is talking about. Evolution says that macroevolution occurred, that one animal type changed into a completely different type. And when you ask for the evidence for that, for birds, pterosaurs, dinosaurs, fish, it's absent. It's not even a question, it's absent. So the very few examples they have, these rare examples of transitional forms, are in animals that are already similar, or fossils that have been misinterpreted or overinterpreted. And so the overall picture is very clear, very clear. There are no real transitional fossils between the groups. And if you think you have them, put up. Let's see them. Provide the diagram with the fossils in order, in size proportionality, in time proportionality. You can't do it. You should be able to do it for the birds. You can't. So
Right.
it's time for everyone to reconsider evolution and abandon, as I did. I have abandoned evolution. And I say to this, the last person believing in evolution, please turn off the lights and shut the door because I'm out of here.
Right. I remember you originally saying that we live now in a time and age where it's like it's like the evolutionary views are just being disproven over and over again. It's like we're living in the age where we're seeing this is happening. And Dr. Jerry Bergman recently on my channel said a similar thing. He said that he thinks that with time, evolutionists will disprove evolution. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these studies coming out, and they're being written by evolutionists themselves. And it's like, okay, how do you still believe in this theory? How do you believe in this hypothesis, this speculation about the past when we got all of this evidence that's weighing against it? If I was an evolutionist, I'd already be convinced it was bogus. Thank
Totally
you.
bogus. It's time to abandon it.
Right. Thank you again, Dr. Werner. I wish we had a little bit more time, but we both got things to do after this.
Sounds good, Brian. Thank you so much for having me on your show and being able to speak to your audience.
Thank you for being here. We enjoyed it. I know I did. I thought that was an incredible presentation. I loved every minute of it. I can't wait to have you back. Thank you, Dr. Werner. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Genesis series with Dr. Carl Werner discussing the so-called transitional fossils that are believed by evolutionists in the fossil record. Um, there's no actual transitional fossils. And that. But we dealt with their claims of transitional fossils. Dr. Carl Werner gave a phenomenal presentation, and we answered a lot of questions. I know it was kind of cut short. There's still a lot of questions I wouldn't mind asking. Maybe I'll have another. Um, Maybe I'll end up doing something else on this topic later on down the road. But in any given case, I thought it was very, very interesting. I loved, enjoyed Dr. Carl Werner's answers. Drop me a comment below if you did too. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't there already. I'm one subscriber away from 300, so just promote my videos, get the word out there on your community page. Don't forget to like this video, give it a thumbs up. Believe it or not, that is not intended to give me a proverbial pat on the back. Rather, that is actually intended to help YouTube promote the video. The more people subscribe to my channel, the more people like the videos, the more people will promote, more YouTube will promote those videos. And if you like a specific video, then that video will also get promoted by YouTube. And so it just kind of helps the YouTube algorithm. So it basically promotes the videos, get this information out to more people. So I don't ask that because I'm just big on numbers and I'm just trying to get a lot of subscribers or you know that subscribers equals more people viewing it. More people viewing it gets this information out to more people. The more you give it a thumbs up, the more it's get out there to more people. And so that's the idea, is to get this information out to as much people as possible. And that's why I ask for to subscribe to my channel and to like the video. I don't just say that because I just like seeing those numbers raise up. No, I actually want more people to get this information and get the word out on it. So I like it to get this information out there to as much people as possible. It helps promote the video, and obviously it helps support the channel as well. And so, of course, don't forget to hit that notification bell. Drop me a comment below, and I will see you on the next one.